The 5-year-old boy knelt on the icy floor, his small hands tightly clasped in prayer, pleading with his stepmother to spare his baby sister and take the punishment himself. Outside, Chicago's fiercest blizzard had swallowed the world in frozen silence. Meanwhile, his father battled through the relentless wall of snow miles away, desperate to save the children he didn't even know were fading away. No one heard their desperate cries. No one caught the looming shadow of the heavy leather belt raised high. But cruelty made a fatal error. It forgot one crucial thing. It forgot about the dog, and it underestimated a father's love of force fierce enough to break through steel barriers. What unfolds next will tear your heart apart, and then rebuild it stronger, braver than before. But before we dive in, drop your location in the comments below. If you believe that guardian angels sometimes come on 4 paws and furry legs, smash that subscribe button now. Because this story proves even the harshest winter can't freeze hope. The wind howled off Lake Michigan, bringing the biting chill of a Chicago winter determined to cloak the world in snow. It was a cold so deep it slipped through the tiniest cracks in window frames and settled deep into the bones. A relentless frost that turned city streets into eerie, snow-carved canyons. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, quivering shadows against the rising drifts, while the heavy gray sky threatened a blizzard that would shut down the highways before midnight. Inside the upscale suburban home on Willow Creek Drive, the storm's fury felt worlds away, softened by the warm scent of cinnamon and the gentle glow of lavish Christmas lights. Mark stood in the hallway, tightening the heavy Kevlar vest draped over his chest. He was a tall, rugged man, broad-shouldered, with deep lines etched around his eyes, etched by years of confronting the city's darkest moments. As a K-9 sergeant, he was no stranger to long, dangerous nights. But tonight, the burden on his shoulders felt heavier than ever. It was Christmas Eve, and the force was stretched thin both by flu and the looming storm. He caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his jaw set tight with determination. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to sit by the fire, hold his children close, and pretend crime took a holiday too. A soft voice drifted from the kitchen doorway. Lana moved toward him with the graceful poise of a dancer. She was breathtaking, with flowing blonde hair that caught the light and eyes as bright and clear as a summer sky, filled now with the kind of warmth Mark had come to cling to after losing his first wife. She wore a cream cashmere sweater that looked impossibly soft, her manicured nails gently resting on his arm. She was everything a perfect wife and mother should be, the woman who stepped in to save his shattered family when grief was drowning him. "I hate leaving you here with all this," Mark sighed, nodding towards the decorations and snow piling high against the windows. Lana smiled softly, reaching up to straighten his collar, her fingers lingering near his neck. "Don't be silly, Mark. It's your duty. The city counts on you." She leaned in, kissing his cheek tenderly. "Besides," she whispered, "I've got everything under control here. I'm going to bake those gingerbread cookies you love, and when you return in the morning, the house will be warm, filled with a scent that feels like heaven itself." Mark smiled, a wave of deep gratitude sweeping over him. He felt truly fortunate, so unbelievably lucky to have found someone who cherished his children as her own, or at least that's what he convinced himself. "Where are they?" Mark asked, glancing toward the living room. "In the den. I think Ian is reading to Mia," Lana replied, her voice softening into a tender, motherly tone. Mark made his way into the den. The room was dim, illuminated solely by the gentle glow of the giant Christmas tree's twinkling lights. On the rug, Ian, just 5 years old, sat cross-legged beside a portable bassinet. Ian was slight for his age, a fragile boy with tousled brown hair and eyes too large for his slender face. He seemed so delicate that a brisk gust could sweep him off his feet. But he wasn't reading. Instead, he sat motionless, fixated on his baby sister, his small frame tense as though guarding something precious. Mia, only 3 months old, lay asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with a slow rhythm that usually brought Mark comfort. "Hey, buddy," Mark whispered, kneeling down beside him. Ian flinched. It was just a slight twitch, a quick rise of his shoulders, as if bracing for a hit, but Mark noticed. Frowning, he reached out a large, rough hand to rest gently on his son's shoulder. Ian didn't lean into the touch. Instead, he stiffened his breathing shallow. Looking up, Mark caught a flicker of terror in his boy's eyes, a raw, instinctive fear that didn't belong on a child's face on Christmas Eve. Ian's eyes darted past Mark and locked onto the doorway where Lana stood leaning casually against the frame, smiling. I'm being good, Daddy, Ian whispered, his voice trembling. I'm really quiet. I know you are, son, Mark replied, brow furrowed. He chalked Ian's jumpiness up to the storm, or perhaps the sorrow of missing his late mother, a sadness that always seemed to resurface around the holidays. Mark drew Ian into a hug. The boy felt rigid like a carved piece of wood. I have to head to work, okay? Be a big boy and help Mommy Lana. Listen to her. All right. Ian nodded eagerly into Mark's chest. Yes, I will. Please come back soon. First thing in the morning, Mark promised. He pressed a kiss to Ian's crown, then bent to kiss Mia's forehead. Standing up, he glanced at Lana. He seems a bit on edge tonight. Lana stepped forward, placing a hand atop Ian's head, her fingers threading gently through his hair. Ian froze completely, his eyes widening. He's just excited for Santa, Mark, and the thunder's scaring him. Don't worry, I'll fix him some hot cocoa. We'll be fine. Mark nodded, swallowing the unease tightening in his gut. He trusted her. He had to. All right, I love you guys. Grabbing his gear bag, he stepped outside into the biting wind. The cold slammed against him like a punch, stinging his face fiercely. His patrol SUV waited in the driveway, its exhaust steaming white clouds into the dark night. Inside the specially modified K-9 crate in the back, Zeke was ready. Zeke, a massive German shepherd, was 5 years old, with a dark sable coat and sharp amber eyes that missed nothing. He was far more than a dog. He was Mark's partner, his shadow, and in many ways his conscience. Usually Zeke was calm before a shift, conserving his energy for the task ahead. But tonight, as Mark approached the driveway, the SUV rocked on its suspension. Zeke was going wild. The dog slammed himself against the wire mesh partition with fierce urgency. His barks were deep, raw, and fierce. This wasn't a joyful welcome, it was a clear, urgent warning. Zeke's fur bristled, his lips pulled back to reveal sharp white teeth. His intense gaze locked onto the front porch where Lana stood waving. Mark swung open the driver's door and slid inside the heater's warmth, hitting him like a welcome embrace. Zeke, calm down, Mark commanded sharply, glancing back through the metal grate. But Zeke ignored him, releasing a sharp, agonizing whine before erupting into another piercing bark aimed straight at the woman in the doorway. Clawing at the window with desperate urgency, Zeke sought escape, desperate to reach something beyond the glass. Easy, boy. Easy, Mark soothed, rapping his fist against the grate. It's just the pressure dropping. The storms have you on edge too, huh? A quick glance at the dashboard confirmed the barometer was falling fast. Convincing himself the dog's restlessness stemmed from the weather, Mark told himself animals sensed these storms long before humans ever did. It had to be nothing more. Outside, Lana kept waving, clutching her cardigan tighter against the raging wind. She appeared so small, helpless against the wild storm backdrop. We'll be back soon, Zeke. Let's get going, Mark murmured, shifting the heavy SUV into reverse. Tires crunched over fresh snow as he slowly backed down the long driveway, stealing one final glance at the house. It looked like a picture-perfect postcard. The glowing yellow windows, the wreath hanging on the door, the silhouette of his beautiful wife. Guilt pricked him sharply as he left them behind, but duty called. He steered the wheel, and the SUV disappeared into the swirling white night. On the porch, Lana watched the red taillights shrink and vanish, swallowed by the relentless snow. She stood there for a long moment, the cold wind tousling her hair across her face, but no shiver escaped her. Slowly, the tender, loving smile melted away from her lips like wax, leaving her features hard and unyielding. The warmth in her eyes faded, replaced by a chilling emptiness, cold and flat, like the frozen lake miles away. Her stance shifted, Grace yielding to a stiff, predatory readiness. She turned and stepped back inside, closing the heavy oak door with a firm, resounding thud. She locked it tight. Then she secured the deadbolt. Silence immediately filled the hallway. The soft Christmas music from the living room now sounded twisted, almost mocking. Lana slowly moved toward the den, her heels clicking a steady rhythm across the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. She paused at the doorway. Ian sat exactly where Mark had left him beside the bassinet. But his eyes did not meet the door. He was curled tightly into himself, hands pressed to his ears, shaking uncontrollably. He knew the act was finished. Lana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words came out low and venomous, cutting deeper than any scream could. Get up! Ian scrambled unsteadily to his feet, knees knocking together. He kept his head down, tears springing to his eyes. Lana moved to the window, staring out into the storm with her back to him. Your father's gone. Ian. He won't be back until morning. Maybe not even then. Not with this weather, she said, turning around with a cruel, unyielding expression. There's a very important guest coming tonight. Someone who has zero tolerance for loud, useless brats. She stepped closer, and Ian flinched backward, nearly stumbling over the bassinet. This is your last warning, Lana said, her voice lowered to a chilling whisper that sent a shiver down Ian's spine. If you or that useless little crybaby in the crib make a single peep tonight, if you disgrace me, I won't just lock you in your room. She jabbed a manicured finger towards the back of the house, pointing to the cold, detached garage. I will toss you both out into the freezing snow to share a night with the rats. Do you get me? Ian nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks, his mouth trembling to speak, but no sound escaped. I asked, do you understand me? Lana snapped. Yes, ma'am, Ian stammered. Good, Lana sneered, smoothing her cashmere sweater as if she'd just been tainted by something dirty. Now get out of my sight. Go clean the hallway floor. I saw snow tracked in on your father's boots. I want it spotless before my guest arrives. As Ian rushed to the kitchen for cleaning rags, wishing with all his heart to be anywhere but here, maybe in the car with Zeke and his dad, Lana glanced toward the baby sleeping quietly in the crib. Sleep tight, little princess? She muttered, a cruel smile tugging at her lips. It's going to be a long, freezing night. The house on Willow Creek Drive was a winter holiday dream, with a 12-foot Douglas fir placed in the living room corner, heavy with hand-blown glass ornaments and velvet ribbons shimmering under soft white lights. A fire flickered in the hearth, but it was purely for show, a gas log's glow that gave the illusion of warmth, but none of its comfort. The real heat, the central furnace that made the grand colonial home livable through the Chicago winter, had been switched off. Lana stood at the wall thermostat in the hallway, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips as she pressed the temperature down, watching the digital numbers fall 60 degrees, 58, 55. The cost of gas is soaring, she whispered to herself, though her voice echoed clearly through the silent house. We have to save money, especially with 2 extra mouths to feed. She turned and moved back into the living room, wrapping a thick white faux fur shawl tighter around her shoulders. She looked every inch an icy queen seated on her throne as she settled into the plush beige sofa. On the coffee table before her stood a bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, breathing deeply in a crystal decanter. She poured herself a generous glass, the deep red liquid swirling against the glass, catching the glow of festive lights. On the floor, feet away, Ian trembled. The 5-year-old was on his hands and knees. Nearby was a plastic bucket filled with cold tap water, water so freezing it numbed the skin on his hands. Lana had handed him a rough, thin rag and pointed to the hardwood floor. I want to see my reflection in it, Ian, she said, voice oozing with fake sweetness. Your dad drags in snow. It's filthy, and filthy boys don't get Christmas presents. Ian dipped the rag into the bucket. The icy water stabbed his small hands like 1,000 biting needles. He bit his lip to hold back the teeth chattering, knowing that noise would grate on her nerves. He squeezed the rag, hard knuckles raw and angry red, and began scrubbing the floorboards. His movements were slow and awkward, his fingers stiff, like they no longer belonged to him. Faster, Lana ordered, not lifting her eyes from her wine glass. She flipped a page in a fashion magazine sharply. "My guest will be here soon, and if this floor isn't spotless, you'll be crashing in the garage with the rats, remember?" Ian scrubbed harder, a tear slipping down his cheek and dropping onto the wooden floor. He hurriedly wiped it away with the chilly rag, terrified she'd catch him and accuse him of making the floor wet once more. The cold air hung thick and low, brushing the floor where he crawled. He could see his breath fogging up just inches from his face, a fleeting ghost of white vanishing as fast as it had appeared. Far off, the world blurred into streaks of horizontal white. Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his K-9 unit, his knuckles pale. The pearl blizzard had grown fierce, turning the windshield into a swirling mosaic of snow that the wiper battled to sweep away. The heater inside the SUV roared, but Mark felt a chill that wasn't born of the weather. A gnawing pit in his gut, a primal warning parents feel when their child's safety is threatened. He couldn't escape the flash of Ian's expression. That sudden flinch wasn't mere shyness, not just the storm. Ian had stared at him like a suspect sizing up an officer before fleeing, terror plain in his eyes. "What's wrong, buddy?" Mark whispered, glancing into the rearview mirror. Zeke in the back kennel hadn't settled. The mighty German Shepherd usually snoozed within 5 minutes of patrol, soothed by the engine's hum, but tonight Zeke sat upright, sharp, his ears swiveling like radar dishes. A low, quivering whine rumbled through the great dog. I know Mark breathed. I feel it too. He pulled the cruiser to the side of the empty road hazard lights, flickering steadily against the snowbanks. He needed to check just to calm his own racing mind. Taking out his personal smartphone, he tapped the home security app. Just last week, he'd installed a high-definition panoramic camera, cleverly hidden as a smoke detector in the living room. He wanted to watch over the kids during long shifts to keep that thread of connection alive. He pressed the icon. On the screen, a white spinning circle appeared. Loading. Mark drummed his fingers on the wheel. "Come on, come on!" The circle spun for 10 seconds, then 20. His phone's signal bar was full LTE at max strength. The connection should have been flawless. Then the screen plunged to black. A dull gray icon of a broken camera emerged with red letters scolding "Connection failed. Device offline." "Damn it," Mark growled, repeatedly hitting retry. "Device offline. Power outage," he muttered hopefully, but the streetlights a mile behind still gleamed bright. If the power was dead at the house, the camera's backup battery would have kept it running for hours, unless someone had cut the router or flipped off the main breaker switch. Why would she shut off the internet? Mark asked the empty cabin. Maybe the storm knocked the line out. His logical mind reasoned. Those outages happen all the time in blizzards. But the tight knot in his belly twisted tighter. The flinch, the dog's uneasy growl, now this blackout. It painted a story he dreaded but couldn't stop piecing together in his detective mind. He shifted the car back into drive, his foot hovering hesitantly above the gas. He was meant to patrol the northern sector, but the steering wheel tugged as if by will of its own, steering the heavy SUV southward, pulling him home. Back inside the quiet living room, a sudden sound shattered the silence, freezing Ian mid-scrub. From the bassinet tucked in the corner, a gentle whimper pierced the silence. Mia was stirring awake. Ian's eyes flew open, filled with alarm. He glanced between the crib and Lana. Lana remained still, though her hand clutching the wine glass froze mid-air, tense with unease. The whimper grew restless, morphing into a persistent, harsh cry. The raw sound of a baby, chilled and hungry. Mia had missed her last feeding because Lana had sent Ian off to clean instead of warming her bottle. "Hush, Mia, please," Ian whispered, voice barely audible, hoping Lana wouldn't catch it. "Please don't cry." But a 3-month-old has no patience for please. The cold air bit at her fragile skin while her empty stomach ached. The fuss escalated into a sharp, desperate wail, shattering the room's heavy silence like a blade. Lana slowly lowered her magazine, her expression unreadable, devoid of warmth, absent of maternal care. Instead, she seemed irritated, jaw clenched tightly, the muscles under her flawless complexion taut with frustration. "Make her stop," Lana ordered flatly. "She's hungry, Mommy." Ian's stammered voice trembling. "And she's cold. Can I get her a bottle?" "I said make her stop." Lana's voice snapped sharp and brittle as a whip. "I'm trying to unwind before my guest arrives. I don't want to hear that noise." Mia's cries swelled, her tiny face likely flushing red in the darkness of the cradle, her little lungs working furiously for each breath. Ian rose, instinct pushing him forward to protect his sister despite his fear. "I'll get the milk. I'll be quick." Then, smash! Lana slammed the wine glass down hard on the marble coffee table. The stem shattered, sending glittering shards and dark wine bursting outward. The red spilled onto the beige rug like a spray of fresh blood. "Sit down!" Lana screamed, rising to her feet. Her towering frame cast a looming, twisted shadow over Ian. "Look what you've done! Look at the mess you caused!" Ian fell to his knees, shielding his head with shaking hands. I'm sorry." Mia's wails filled the air, full-throated and piercing. Lana ignored the spilled wine, marching back to the bassinet. She didn't reach in to comfort Mia. She didn't check her diaper or soothe her cry. Instead, she stared down at the sobbing infant, pure disgust etched across her face. "You're nothing but noise," Lana spat at the crib. "Just like your father, always demanding." Without hesitation, she grabbed a thick, decorative wool blanket draped over the armchair. A heavy, dense throw made for show, not comfort. "Lana, no!" Ian gasped, horror dawning on him. Lana's cold blue eyes snapped toward him. "One more word, Ian, and you'll be outside barefoot." Ian clamped his hands over his mouth, trembling so violently his teeth clicked together. Lana turned back to the bassinet with a casual, almost bored flick of her wrist. She flung the dense wool blanket over the bassinet's opening, not gently laying it, but throwing it with force, sealing the edges firmly like a grave. "There," Lana said, brushing off her hands. "That will muffle the noise." Beneath the heavy wool, Mia's cries continued muffled, faint, suffocated, struggling to break free but silenced for now. Lana stepped over the wine-stained rug and sank back onto the sofa. She picked up her magazine, legs crossed with a cold composure. "Now, Ian," she said smoothly, as if she hadn't just jeopardized a baby's well-being. "You missed a spot near the fireplace. Scrub it again. And if I hear that baby crying through the blanket, I'll give you a reason to truly weep." Ian plunged his numb, freezing hands back into the icy water, his gaze locked on the still bundle wrapped in the blanket over the crib, silently pleading that his sister was still alive. The heavy oak clock in the hallway tolled the quarter hour, its mournful chime echoing through the frigid house. Lana stood firm in the middle of the living room, her eyes fixed on the splash of red wine staining the beige carpet, irritation etched across her face. She exhaled sharply, her breath misting in the cold air. "I need something stronger than this," she muttered under her breath, and flicked a fragment of broken glass toward the fireplace. Without hesitation, she pivoted and strode toward the kitchen, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, like the ticking of an ominous countdown. As she pushed through the swinging door, she didn't glance back at the two trembling kids she left behind. For Ian, the sound of the kitchen door closing was the signal he'd been silently begging for. His body shook uncontrollably, half from the biting chill seeping through his thin shirt, half from the adrenaline coursing through his young veins. He stared at the bassinet. The thick wool blanket Lana had tossed over it lay still and unmoving. Not a single sound stirred beneath it. "Mia," Ian whispered, his voice fragile and cracking. He stayed low, aware how the floorboards creaked with even the slightest step. So he crawled instead, moving on raw, scraped knees, fighting through the sting of his red, rubbed skin. He reached the sofa and slid his hand deep into the darkness beneath the heavy furniture. His fingers brushed past dust bunnies until they met cold plastic. The emergency bottle. He'd hidden it there earlier that afternoon while Lana was lost in her makeup. The milk was old cold, probably sour, but it was liquid. Clutching the bottle, he scrambled back to the crib. With trembling hands, he yanked off the heavy wool blanket. There was Mia, her tiny face flushed a deep, sickly red, her mouth open in a silent, desperate cry. She'd worn herself out, wailing against the suffocating weight of the fabric. Her chest rose and fell with shallow, frantic breaths. "I'm here. I'm right here." Ian whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. He gently lifted her head just like his dad used to, and pressed the bottle's nipple to her lips. Mia latched on right away, desperation fueling her weak, unsteady suckling. Ian watched her, his heart pounding fiercely against his ribs. He stroked her forehead tenderly with his thumb, trying to pass along every bit of warmth he had left. "Drink quickly, Mia. Please just drink quickly," he whispered, his eyes flicking anxiously toward the kitchen door. He had only a couple of minutes, maybe 3 at most. Mia drank, her breathing slowing, steadying as the liquid filled her empty stomach. For a brief moment, the horror of the night faded away, replaced by the pure raw connection of a brother fiercely guarding his sister. Then the kitchen door swung open. No warning footsteps, no preamble, just the sudden whoosh of the door, and Lana standing there, a fresh bottle of vodka in one hand, her smartphone in the other. Ian froze. The bottle was still pressed to Mia's lips. Lana didn't shout. She didn't throw the vodka. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across her face. This was no amused grin. It was the cold, calculated look of a predator finally cornering the mouse it had been toying with all night. "Well, well," Lana said softly, stepping inside the room. There stood the little thief. Ian yanked the bottle away from Mia, clutching it to his chest like it was a weapon. She was starving. Lana crossed the room in 3 long strides. She bent down, her fingers gripping the collar of Ian's shirt with unexpected strength. She yanked him backward forcefully, dragging him across the floor. No, please!" Ian pleaded, his heels scrabbling helplessly against the rug. "I told you," Lana said, her voice unnervingly calm and conversational, which made it even more terrifying. "I told you that filthy boys don't earn rewards, and now you're stealing from me, hoarding food like a rat." She hauled him to the far corner of the room, away from the cozy warmth of the gas fireplace, away from his sister. She slammed him down hard. Ian's body hit the wall with a dull thud, curling into a protective ball to shield his head. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Lana's phone, gripped in her left hand, lit up with a rapid stream of notifications. She paused, staring at the screen. Her expression shifted from cruel to irritated. Finally, she hissed, ignoring Ian's silent sobbing in the corner. She strode swiftly to the impressive front door. She typed out a reply on the screen. "Where are you? The storm is worsening." A response popped up instantly. "5 minutes away. Roads are a nightmare. Get the door ready." Lana glanced at the heavy deadbolt on the front door. Usually Mark secured this every night. It was the rule, the lifeline. Reaching out, Lana flipped the deadbolt open with a loud snap. Then she released the chain latch. 5 minutes, she muttered to the empty hallway. Just 5 more minutes of this charade. She looked back at the living room, eyes narrowing. The plan was straightforward, a heartbreaking accident. The heating fails during the blizzard. The old windows would blow open. By the time Mark came home in the morning or the coroner arrived, the children would be icy blue, and she would be the grieving stepmother, supposedly knocked out or asleep in the guest room while tragedy took hold. But to pull it off, it had to be real. They had to be truly cold. 5 miles away, the blizzard had transformed the world into a swirling white abyss. Mark's patrol SUV idled on the shoulder of Route 12. Inside, the chaos was palpable. Zeke wasn't just barking anymore. The enormous dog had pushed his nose through the gap in the wire partition, emitting a sound Mark had never heard before. A high-pitched, trembling howl that echoed like raw human sorrow. "Zeke, stop! What's gotten into you?" Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. But Zeke wouldn't stop. He scratched frantically at the metal grate, his nails screeching on steel eyes wide and desperate, fixed on the rear window, gazing southward toward home. Mark glanced at his phone again. He tapped the View security app. Connection failed. He dialed the landline at their house. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. He called Lana's cell straight to voicemail. "Why won't you answer?" Mark whispered, his heartbeat rising. Logic urged him to stay put. The roads were deadly. Leaving his patrol area would break protocol and could cost him his badge. But then he looked at Zeke. He had trusted this dog through every drug bust and armed standoff. Zeke sensed fear. Zeke sensed danger. And right now, Zeke was telling him in the only way he knew that his pack was in grave peril. Zeke caught the scent of fear. He felt the looming threat. In this moment, Zeke was communicating through the only language he knew, warning that his pack was fading, slipping away. "Forget the rules," Mark growled fiercely. He grabbed the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is K-91. I've got a personal emergency. I'm 1076 heading to my residence. Signal 100, K-91 repeat. You're leaving your sector." The dispatcher's voice crackled with confusion. Captain ordered all units to hold their positions. Mark shouted, "I'm going home." He slammed the mic onto the dashboard, shifted the SUV into gear, and spun the beast around right there on the highway, tires howling as they fought for grip on the slick black ice. The engine growled as he mashed the accelerator, charging head first into the raging storm. Back in the living room, Lana stood before the floor-to-ceiling French windows, gazing out at the backyard. The wind battered the glass like a wild force, desperate to break in. She glanced at the thermostat. 50 degrees. "Not fast enough," she whispered. "He'll arrive in 5 minutes. It has to look like it happened hours ago." She set her vodka bottle on the mantel and buttoned up her thick, white fox fur coat. Pulling the collar up over her ears, she sealed herself in warmth. Then she moved towards the French doors. Ian, watching nervously from his corner, blinked wide-eyed. "Mommy Lana, what are you doing?" Lana didn't respond. She unlocked the latch at the bottom of the doors, then the top one. Gripping the handles, she threw them open. Roar! The sound slammed through the room, overwhelming everything. The blizzard didn't just come in, it exploded inside. A wall of freezing wind drove in, carrying sharp ice pellets and swirling snow battering the living room. The temperature plunged 20 degrees in seconds. The curtains whipped violently, toppling a vase. Snow spiraled onto the expensive Persian rug, quickly piling up. "No!" Ian screamed, though the wind ripped his voice away. The cold hit instantly and mercilessly. It was like being plunged into freezing water. Lana fought the gusts, returned to the sofa, and sat down. She crossed her legs, wrapped her fur coat tighter around herself, and picked up her vodka. She looked like a queen watching a grim fate unfold. "It's just a draft, Ian," she said, her voice rising above the howling wind. "Just a terrible, unfortunate draft. The latch must have broken." She gestured to the open doors pouring in the white storm. "Now sit there quietly. My guest is almost here to help clean up once you're asleep." Ian huddled against the wall, eyes wide as the snow crept toward Mia's crib, realizing in horror that the sleep Lana meant was not one you ever woke from. The living room wasn't home anymore. It had become part of the frozen nightmare, trapped outside, with those French doors wide open. The blizzard didn't just enter, it took claim of the space. Snow drifted across the Persian rugs, piling up against the coffee table legs like white sand buried in ice. The temperature dropped below freezing, turning their breaths into thick, frantic clouds of gray mist. Ian's shivering had stopped. He'd passed that point minutes ago. His tiny body went rigid, muscles locked in one last desperate try to generate warmth. He curled tightly over the bassinet, one thin arm stretched wide, pressing his chest against the wicker frame, as if he could block the wind from reaching his sister. His lips had turned a haunting shade of violet. His teeth rattled fiercely, the sharp clatter piercing the eerie stillness between thunderclaps of the storm. Don't worry, Mia," Ian whispered, voice trembling like a fragile thread. "Daddy's on his way. Santa's coming soon." He squeezed his eyes tight and pressed his hands together, knuckles raw and cracked from the relentless cold water earlier. He wasn't begging for toys nor asking for candy. His quiet prayer was simple, pure, and desperate. Please, God, send Daddy. Please just send Daddy. Across the room, Lana reclined on the couch, untouched by the icy blast outside. Her white fox fur coat hugged her neck like a shield, wrapping her in a comforting warmth the children could only dream of. She regarded Ian with clinical detachment, like a scientist studying a fragile specimen locked in a jar. She took a slow sip of vodka, the heat spreading inside her, then checked her phone, the glow illuminating her face, casting deep shadows beneath her eyes. He's taking too long, she thought coldly. They're not fading out fast enough. Her thumbs danced over the screen. Lana, where are you? Hurry! They're nearly done. The boy's turning blue, but the baby still clings to life. Lana, I need you here to clean up the mess. We have to make it look like the latch snapped and I was upstairs asleep. She sent the message and let the phone drop onto the couch beside her. Glancing back at Ian, the boy shivered violently, so hard the bassinet trembled. It was pitiful. It was revolting. It was taking far too long. 2 miles south on Willow Creek Road, everything crashed to a grinding halt. Mark had been pushing the SUV beyond its limit. He knew it but couldn't stop himself. He barreled blindly into the whiteout, guided solely by memory and the bone-deep fear that his family was fighting for their lives. He never saw the snowplow drift a towering wall of frozen ice and snow dumped across the lane by the relentless wind until it was too late. The hefty K-9 unit slammed into the frozen barricade with a sickening crunch. The airbag didn't even trigger. The impact was cushioned enough to soften the blow, but deep enough to bury the front end entirely. Mark was thrown forward, slammed hard against his seatbelt. The breath was knocked clean out of him. The engine coughed, gave a final rasp, and died. "No, no, no!" Mark roared, pounding his fist on the dashboard in fury. He turned the key again. The engine clicked flatly. Ice choked the front grille in a solid frozen pack. The air intake was completely clogged. The car was dead. Zeke, Mark shouted, looking back urgently. The German shepherd hurled himself against the cage, frantic but unseen and unheard. The dog's sharp whines deepened into a fierce, guttural bark that demanded immediate action. Mark peered through the windshield but could barely see past the hood. He checked the GPS. 2 miles. 2 miles from his driveway. In this blizzard, 2 miles was a sentence to freeze. A distance that could take an hour to cross if you didn't succumb to the cold first. But then he glanced up at the phone mounted on the dash. The security cameras were still dead black. "I'm coming for you," Ian Mark whispered, no hesitation in his voice. He grabbed his portable radio, clipped it to his shoulder, and flung open the driver's door. The wind hit him like a fist, nearly knocking him back. He fought the blast and scrambled out the snow, immediately swallowing him up past his knees. Racing to the rear of the SUV, he yanked open the hatch. "Let's go, Zeke!" The massive dog needed no second command. Zeke sprang free from the cage landing with raw power that defied the storm's fury. Not stopping to sniff, he pushed forward without pause. He didn't pause to catch his breath. Instead, he spun sharply, clamping his teeth onto the sleeve of Mark's uniform jacket, tugging fiercely as if to shout, "Run, run right now!" Mark grabbed hold of Zeke's leash, clipped it securely to the dog's tactical harness, and they surged forward. This wasn't just a run. It was a desperate, lung-searing dash against the merciless wild. The wind howled in Mark's ears, biting at his eyes, pushing him back with all its might. Every stride was a battle through the towering drifts. But Zeke was an unstoppable force. The dog lowered his head, his mighty shoulders plowing through the snow like a mighty machine dragging Mark forward when he faltered, guiding him through the blinding whiteout. Together they moved as one man and guardian dog, carving a path through the raging storm, driven by an unbreakable bond of love and a fierce primal instinct to shield the pack. Meanwhile, inside the quiet living room, the frozen silence shattered. Wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, Mia's fragile body finally reached its breaking point. The icy air she had been breathing overwhelmed her delicate lungs. She started coughing a harsh, wet rasp that shook her tiny chest. "It's okay, Mia." "Quiet now?" Ian whispered, his teeth chattering. "Don't cry, just don't cry." But the cough wouldn't ease. It only grew worse, more violent. Mia's stomach, full of the cold milk Ian had desperately fed her, rebelled. With a choking, gurgling sound, she vomited. The sharp scent of sour milk cut through the freezing air. The vomit soaked the front of her sleeper and dripped onto the pristine white sheets of the bassinet. Lana rose abruptly. The sound of retching and the nasty smell hit her like a slap. She didn't feel worry. She felt disgust. "You filthy little creatures," she hissed. This wasn't part of the plan. They were supposed to drift off peacefully, to look like tragic angels found in the snow, not a sick, vomit-soaked mess to be cleaned up. "My guest is arriving any minute. The scene must be flawless. It had to be tragic, not revolting. I told you to keep her silent." Lana screamed, her voice slicing through the howling wind. "No noise, remember?" She threw her phone onto the couch. The cold, icy calm she had preserved all night shattered, exposing the fiery, volatile fury beneath. She stormed across the room, her heels crunching on the snow that had drifted inside. "I'm sorry. She's sick. She's sick," Ian cried, trying desperately to shield the mess and his sister. "Move!" Lana kicked his leg. He cried out, rolling aside, revealing the crib. Lana stared down at the vomit-soaked luxury linens, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You ruin everything," she spat venomously. "Everything has to be perfect for him, and you destroy it with your filth." Turning away, she marched purposefully toward the hallway closet. This was the closet where Mark kept his spare uniforms, dress shoes, and off-duty gear. Yin watched, frozen with fear, as she flung the closet door open. She rummaged roughly for a moment, pushing aside heavy winter coats until she found what she wanted. She pulled it free. A wide black leather belt, Mark's duty belt. The leather was thick, stiff, and heavy, with a large silver buckle that jingled ominously as she lifted it from the hanger. It symbolized Mark's authority, a tool of law enforcement now warped into a weapon of domestic terror. Lana stepped back into the living room, wrapping the leather strap tightly around her hand once, then twice, testing its tension with deliberate care. The silver buckle swung freely, glinting in the glow of the Christmas tree lights. Clink, clink. She stopped right before the shrinking boy and the ailing baby. The wind howled fiercely through the wide-open doors behind her, whipping her hair into a wild halo, casting her silhouette like a demon emerging from icy depths. "Since you two won't surrender quietly," Lana whispered, tightening the belt in her hand. "I suppose it's time I teach you a hard lesson in obedience." The air in the living room shifted palpably from cold neglect to something far darker and more volatile. It was like a pressure cooker filled with rage alcohol and biting cold moments, illuminated only by the blinking festive Christmas lights. The distorted, tinny notes of Silent Night echoed eerily from a music box perched on the mantel, clashing hauntingly against the storm's furious howl, rushing in through the French doors. Lana swayed unsteadily over the children. The vodka had stripped away every last whisper of humanity, exposing a raw, burning core of selfishness and rage beneath. In her twisted mind, she wasn't the villain, she was the victim. The graceful wife of a revered officer burdened with his ghosts. The vomit, the cries, and the fearless glare of a 5-year-old boy who saw straight through her facade. "Yeah. You think you're clever, huh?" Lana slurred the heavy leather belt dangling ominously from her fingers. The silver buckle clicked sharply against the wooden floorboards. Click, click. Feeding her behind my back, making messes. Ian remained silent. He crouched protectively over the bassinet, his small hands gripping the wicker rim until his knuckles went white. He was trying to be a human shield, a living wall between the woman draped in fur and the fragile infant behind him. "She's just a baby," Ian whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of cold and pure terror. "She's innocent. She's a parasite," Lana spat venomously. And you're a liar!" She lashed out, not stumbling drunkenly, but striking with sudden, fierce violence. She yanked Ian backward by the thin fabric at the back of his shirt. He screamed as he lost his grip on the crib, his body sliding across the snow-dusted rug. "No, Mia," Ian cried, scrambling to crawl back, but Lana stepped between him and the cradle. She reached down into the bassinet. Mia, weak and exhausted from vomiting, looked up, her eyes glassy and unfocused, uttering a soft, distressed gurgle. Lana did not cradle her. Instead, she grabbed Mia roughly by the front of her vomit-stained sleeper, bunching the fabric in her fist like trash. She lifted the 3-month-old helplessly into the air, Mia's head lolling back, unsupported, her tiny limbs flailing. "No, Mommy. Please don't," Ian shrieked as he staggered to his feet. Lana spun, hurling the baby toward the plush beige sofa. It wasn't a murderous throw, but the force behind it was brutal. Mia crashed down onto the cushions, bounced once, then rolled onto her side, the impact knocking the wind from her before she burst into a high-pitched, terrified scream. "There," Lana sneered coldly. "Now she's out of the way." She whirled back toward Ian, her eyes wild and manic. Her right hand grabbed the black leather duty belt, which unfurled like a venomous serpent, rising up high into the air. The silver buckle shimmered, reflecting the flashing Christmas lights. Red, green, a grim warning signal. Outside, the world blurred into a relentless white fury. Mark's lungs burned fiercely with each breath. Every inhale felt like shards of shattered glass scraping his throat. His legs dragged boots sinking deep into the knee-high snow, yet he pressed on, unable to slow. Zeke was just 5 yards ahead, a shadow slicing through the storm's chaos. The dog's gait had changed, no longer running but tracking, nose pressed close to the ground, ears alert and angled forward, tuned to a sound lost beneath the howl of the raging wind. They rounded the last bend in the long driveway. The house appeared through the blizzard like a haunting specter. Dark everywhere, except for one glowing window, a grand pane framing the living room like a cinema screen. Mark stumbled onto the porch, clutching the railing to keep upright. Wiping snow from his stinging eyes, gasping for steady air, he braced to see a calm, familiar scene. But maybe he was wrong. Maybe the camera was malfunctioning. Maybe everyone was asleep. Then his gaze pierced the window glass. Time shattered. The wind's roar muted to a dull hum. His heart froze. He saw the tree. The snow sprawled across the rug. The open doors letting winter's fury inside. And then he saw her, Lana, his wife, the woman he kissed just an hour ago, standing rigid in the middle of the room, her white fur coat making her look monstrous. But it wasn't the coat that stopped Mark's blood cold. It was what she clutched, his belt. His duty belt, the leather band he donned daily to protect the city. The emblem of his sacred oath to shield the vulnerable. She held it high above her head. The heavy metal buckle swung at the crest, ready to crash down with brutal force. And beneath the arc of that weapon was his son. Mark unleashed a guttural roar, primal and raw, an anguished howl, tearing from deep within his soul. Fatigue dissolved. Cold vanished in that heartbeat. The man who upheld law and order died, replaced by a fierce father who'd rip the world apart to shield his child. Beside him, Zeke held silent. No bark, no growl. The dog froze for a fleeting moment, amber eyes locked on the danger through the glass. The fur along his spine rose sharply, a razor-edged ridge. Zeke understood the threat. Inside the living room, Ian saw the belt rise. He knew the sting of that belt, a pain he'd felt before. A secret lesson Lana taught him once when he'd shattered a vase, one he never dared share with his father. He knew the buckle hit with a fiercer force than the leather strap alone. He knew it scorched like fire. But his gaze drifted to the sofa. Mia lay there vulnerable. If Lana missed him, or if her rage turned toward the baby, Mia wouldn't survive. She was just too small. One strike from that buckle, Ian didn't run away or hide beneath the table. Instead, he charged forward. He dropped to his knees right before Lana, sliding across the slick, icy floorboards until he was directly beneath the menacing weapon's path. He clasped his tiny raw hands tightly together, pressing them to his chest in a silent plea. Bowing his head, he exposed his fragile neck, his body shaking uncontrollably. Tears streamed down his cheeks, freezing in icy trails, but his voice rang clear, cutting through the storm's soundtrack. Mommy Ian cried out, voice trembling with desperate hope. "Mommy, please look at me. I'm the one who's bad." Lana paused, her arm frozen at the pinnacle of its swing. Looking down at the boy offering himself like a sacrifice, Ian cried out, clutching tightly to the cold wooden floor as tears streamed down his face. He knelt at her feet, his posture humbling. "I'm the one who made the mess. Blame me. Hurt me. Please, Mom, hurt me." "Don't hit Mia. She's just a child. She won't survive." He lifted his gaze, his deep brown eyes shimmering with a heart-wrenching blend of fear and devotion. "Please, hurt me instead. I can bear it. I won't shed a tear. Just leave Mia alone." The room seemed to hold its breath in that heavy silence. The electronic lullaby hummed softly, "Sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace." Lana looked down at the 5-year-old, begging for pain to fall on him and spare his sister. Any ordinary heart would have shattered at the sight. Any normal person would have dropped the belt and fallen to their knees in shame. But Lana's heart was far from ordinary. She saw Ian's vulnerability not as bravery, but with cold disdain. To her, this wasn't courage, it was rebellion. He was trying to play the hero, trying to steal her control. Her grip on the leather tightened, knuckles whitening with rage. A cruel, twisted smile curled at her lips. "So you want to be the hero, Ian?" she hissed, her voice thick with venom. "Fine. Heroes bleed." She planted her feet wider, bracing for impact. The belt never dropped. She pulled it back even further, summoning every ounce of strength to bring down the heavy silver buckle, aiming squarely for the small, trembling back of the boy who knelt before her. The leather belt reached the peak of its arc. Lana's face contorted with a ruthless mix of effort and hatred, her gaze fixed unflinchingly on the fragile, quivering back of the 5-year-old on his knees. No hesitation, no mercy. With a fierce grunt, she snapped her wrist forward, sending the thick strap and heavy silver buckle crashing down like a whip. The air sliced sharply as leather tore through it. Ian squeezed his eyes shut, his body coiled tight, bracing for the burning sting to sear his skin. He didn't flinch or dodge. He held his breath, willing to endure the pain if it would keep his sister safe. But the blow never came. Boom! The sound blasted louder than the storm outside, louder than the music inside a cosmic jolt, altering the universe's path. The heavy oak front door didn't just open, it exploded inward. Mark had rammed it with his shoulder, pouring every ounce of his 200-pound frame and desperate sprint into the impact. Normally, the deadbolt would have held firm, or at least cracked slowly, but tonight the deadbolt was undone. The latch hung open, waiting for a lover who would never show. The door crashed back on its hinges, smashing into the hallway wall with a force that shook framed photos from plaster glass, shattering everywhere. The wind roared into the foyer, a swirling tempest of snow and fury. Lana froze, belt poised just inches from Ian's back, her arm frozen mid-swing, paralyzed by shock. She turned toward the noise, her mouth parting silently in disbelief. She caught a shadowy figure in the doorway, but before she could register it was her husband. Another presence stormed the room. A blur of black and sable tore through the entrance, a shadow born of night itself. Zeke didn't bark. He didn't hesitate. He had caught sight of the raised weapon through the window, and instinct, both trained and wolf-deep, compelled him to shield his pack. He took command, completely covering the distance from the doorway to the heart of the living room in just 2 powerful strides. His paws scrambled for grip on the slick, snow-covered floor, claws digging fierce into the wood as he propelled himself into the air. "No!" Lana screamed, throwing her arm up instinctively to shield her face. That very arm gripped the belt. Zeke's jaws clamped down on her right forearm with the crushing force of a hydraulic press. His teeth pierced through the thick, white fox fur, burrowed through the cashmere sweater, and sank deep into the muscle beneath. The impact sent Lana staggering backward, knocking her off her feet. She hit the floor hard, the air rushing from her lungs in a sharp gasp. The belt ripped from her grasp, sliding across the room and clattering harmlessly along the baseboards. Zeke did not maul her. He didn't shake his head violently to tear flesh. He was a trained law enforcement K-9. He held firm, pinning her to the Persian rug, his massive paws pressed down against her chest. His muzzle buried into her sleeve, growling a low, menacing rumble that vibrated through her ribs. If she flinched, he would bite down harder. If she resisted, he would end it swiftly. "Mark!" Lana shrieked, her voice piercing with terror and agony. "Get him off! He's hurting me, Mark!" Mark burst into the room moments later. Snow clung to his coat, his face flushed from the biting wind, chest heaving. His hand moved to his hip, closing around the grip of his service weapon, but he didn't draw it. The threat had been subdued. The predator was restrained. Without looking at Lana, ignoring her screams, he dropped to the floor, sliding on his knees until he reached Ian. Ian! Mark gasped, his voice raw with desperation. He wrapped his strong arms around the boy, curling his body protectively, forming a human shield against the cold, the cruel wind, and the harshness of the world. He lifted Mia off the sofa with one arm, clutching the trembling, vomit-streaked infant tight against his chest, sheltering both children between his body and the warmth of his own. "I've got you," Mark choked out, burying his face in Ian's snowy hair. "I've got you. Daddy's here." Ian was rigid in his hold. The boy didn't return the embrace. Instead, he trembled so violently his teeth clicked sharply like castanets. Trapped in the endless loop of terror, his mind unable to grasp that the belt hadn't struck him. "Oh, I'm sorry," Ian whispered, his wide eyes empty, fixed on the floor. "I'm sorry, Mommy, it was me. I took the milk. Don't hurt Mia. Hurt me instead. Please, just hurt me." No, Ian, stop!" Mark cried, tears spilling hot and fast over his frost-bitten cheeks. "It's over now. She can't hurt you anymore." Mark shifted his hold, pulling Ian even closer, and as he did, the collar of Ian's thin, oversized t-shirt slipped down his shoulder. Mark froze instantly. The living room lights flickered on and off red green, casting an eerie glow over the skin on his son's back. It wasn't just raw from the cold. Spanning the small, fragile shoulder blade was a raised welt, old, yellowed and purple at the edges, healing but unmistakably there. Below it, near the ribs, was another mark. A faint crescent-shaped scar, as if left by a heavy ring or a stubborn buckle. Mark stared at the bruises, his breath caught tight in his throat. These wounds weren't from tonight. They were weeks old, possibly months. The harsh truth hit him like a devastating blow. This wasn't a single burst of anger. This wasn't a slip caused by drunkenness. This was a ruthless, secret war of suffering, one that had been raging silently right under his roof. Every time Ian flinched, every moment he stumbled, every time he wore long sleeves in the heat, he felt like he had failed them all. He, the guardian, the honored officer, had allowed a monster to rest beneath his roof, while his children endured their own personal hell. "Oh God," Mark groaned, a sound ripped raw from the depths of his soul. "Oh God, Ian, what have I done? Is she really furious?" Ian whimpered softly, burying his face into Mark's rain-soaked coat. Was she going to lock us up in the garage? Mark's eyes lifted. Zeke still held Lana firmly down. Tears cascaded from her, a blend of pain and desperate self-pity, struggling futilely against the dog's unrelenting grip. "Mark, please," she cried out. "I was only trying to discipline him. He stole from me. He's a thief." She begged, "Call the dog off." Mark gently laid the kids down on the rug, pulling his heavy police jacket over them, like armor. Rising Mark's transformation was terrifying. The sorrow in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a bone-chilling, white-hot rage fiercer than the blizzard outside.